I stood outside the mansion where I grew up, holding nothing but a worn duffel bag, and the echoes of my father's final words still ringing in my ears. "You'll never make it out there, you worthless piece of trash." My brother Brandon had smirked from the doorway, his arms crossed. "Just come crawling back, little sis. We'll be waiting." That was the day I turned 18. That was the day my family threw me away like garbage. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how I went from sleeping on a friend's couch to inheriting $5 billion, and how that money became both my salvation and my battlefield. But before I get to the inheritance, before the courtroom drama and the sweet taste of justice, you need to understand what they did to me. You need to know why every dollar I inherited felt like vindication. The Vance family had always been about appearances. My father Richard ran a successful investment firm, my mother Diane sat on charity boards and hosted lavish dinner parties, and Brandon, the golden child, was being groomed to take over the family empire. Then there was me, the mistake, the daughter who never quite fit the mold. I wasn't interested in high society or business mergers. I loved art, design, and coffee shop poetry nights. To them, I was an embarrassment waiting to happen. The breaking point came 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. I had been accepted to a prestigious art school in New York with a partial scholarship, but I needed help with living expenses. When I asked my parents at dinner, my father had laughed, actually laughed, and said he wouldn't waste money on a degree that would lead nowhere. My mother had pursed her lips and suggested I marry well instead. Brandon had called me a leech. I should have seen it coming. The years of subtle put-downs, the way they forgot my birthdays but celebrated Brandon's with extravagant parties, the college fund that mysteriously existed for him but not for me. But I was young and stupid and still believed that family meant something. On my 18th birthday, they handed me an ultimatum. Give up on art school, enroll in business school like Brandon, or get out. When I refused, my father had his assistant pack my things. My mother didn't even come downstairs to say goodbye. Brandon took a selfie of me leaving with my duffel bag and posted it on social media with the caption, "Dead weight finally gone." The first year on my own was hell. I worked 3 jobs, barely sleeping, living in a studio apartment the size of a closet. I made lattes at Starbucks from 5 to noon, waited tables at an Italian restaurant from 2 to 9, and took freelance graphic design gigs whenever I could stay awake. My hands were always raw from washing dishes, my feet constantly ached, and I lived on ramen and day-old pastries from work. But I was free. For the first time in my life, nobody was telling me I wasn't good enough. Nobody was comparing me to Brandon. Nobody was making me feel like I owed them for the privilege of existing. The only person from my old life who reached out was my grandfather, William Vance. He was my father's father, a man who had built his fortune from nothing and never forgot where he came from. While my father had grown cold and obsessed with status, Grandpa William had remained kind. He started calling me once a month, taking me to dinner at a small diner he loved, far from the fancy restaurants the rest of the family frequented. He never pitied me. He never offered to fix my situation. Instead, he listened. He asked about my design work, looked at my portfolio, and told me stories about his own struggles when he was young. Once, when I broke down crying over my burnt spaghetti in his kitchen, exhausted from working 16-hour days, he had simply held my hand and said, "Don't ever let them make you fall, kiddo. You're stronger than all of them combined." I didn't know then that he was dying. He never told me about the cancer eating away at his pancreas, never mentioned that doctors had given him 6 months. He spent those 6 months watching me survive, watching me build something from nothing, and apparently, he spent them planning something too. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was between shifts, finally catching a 2-hour nap when my phone rang. It was a lawyer named Mr. Harrison, and he informed me in a professional but gentle tone that William Vance had passed away 3 days ago. The funeral had already happened. My family hadn't bothered to inform me. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I sat on my lumpy mattress and cried for an hour, mourning the only person who had ever truly seen me, the only person who had believed I was worth something. Then, Mr. Harrison said something that made me stop crying. He said there would be a reading of the will in 3 days, and I was requested to attend. Required, actually. My presence was mandatory. I almost didn't go. The thought of facing my family again, of sitting in a room with the people who had thrown me away, made my stomach turn. But I remembered Grandpa William's words, his steady belief in me, and I decided to face them one last time. I owed him that much. I borrowed a simple black dress from my roommate and took the bus to the law office downtown. My hands were shaking as I walked into the building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed money. The receptionist directed me to a conference room on the 15th floor, and when I opened the door, I felt like I had stepped back in time. There they were. My father in his custom Italian suit, sitting at the head of the table like he owned the place. My mother beside him, dripping in pearls and superiority. Brandon sprawled in his chair, smirking at his phone. They all looked up when I entered, and the expressions on their faces ranged from surprise to disgust. "You actually came," my mother said, her voice icy. "How desperate." My father didn't even acknowledge me. He turned to Brandon and clapped him on the shoulder. Don't worry, son. Everything will go to you, as it should. Your grandfather knew you were the future of this family. Brandon grinned and finally looked at me. This should be quick. Don't let us keep you from your shift at Starbucks. I sat down in a chair far from them, my heart pounding. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But Mr. Harrison entered the room then, a distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He carried a leather folder and set it on the table with purpose. Thank you all for coming, he said. We're here for the reading of William Vance's last will and testament. Let's begin. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, but my family seemed relaxed, confident. My father leaned back in his chair. My mother examined her manicure. Brandon tapped away on his phone, barely paying attention. They already knew how this would go. They had probably known for weeks. Mr. Harrison opened the folder and began to read. The first few items were standard, small bequests to various charities and old friends. My family barely listened. Then Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and read the words that changed everything. To my beloved granddaughter, Emma Vance, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all assets, properties, and financial holdings, totaling approximately $5 billion. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment nobody moved, nobody breathed, then chaos erupted. What the hell did you just say? My father roared, slamming his hands on the table. That's impossible. That's completely impossible. My mother's purse clattered to the floor, her face drained of all color. She looked like she might faint. Brandon jumped out of his chair so fast it toppled backward. This is bullshit, he shouted. She's the one you threw out. She's nothing. She's nobody. Mr. Harrison remained calm, his hands folded on the folder. I understand this is surprising, but William Vance's wishes were very clear. Emma receives everything. There are no trusts, no guardianships, no conditions. It's hers outright. My father turned his rage on me. You manipulated him. You poisoned his mind against us. I found my voice, though it shook. He chose me, not you. My mother recovered enough to try a different tactic. Her face transformed into a mask of false sweetness. Emma, darling, you're so young. You don't understand these things. We're your family. Of course we'll help you manage this. We'll protect you from making terrible mistakes. My father nodded eagerly. Exactly. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll take care of everything. You won't have to burden yourself with these complicated financial matters. Brandon laughed, but it sounded bitter. Yeah, because if you try to manage $5 billion on your own, you'll lose it all in a week. Come on, Emma, be realistic. I felt something shift inside me. They thought I was still that scared 18-year-old girl they had kicked out. They thought I would crumble under pressure and hand them control. But I had survived 2 years without them. I had learned to stand on my own. And sitting in that conference room, listening to their transparent manipulation, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt powerful. Mr. Harrison's voice cut through their attempts. I'm afraid that's not possible. Mr. Vance's will is ironclad. The estate belongs solely to Emma. She has complete control. Furthermore, there are specific provisions regarding any attempts to contest or interfere with this inheritance. What provisions? My father demanded. Mr. Harrison looked at him steadily. I'll be discussing those with Emma privately. This concludes the reading. Emma, if you'll stay behind, we have additional matters to address. My family didn't leave quietly. My father threatened lawsuits. My mother wept crocodile tears. Brandon called me names I won't repeat. But eventually, security escorted them out, and I was alone with Mr. Harrison in the suddenly quiet conference room. He poured me a glass of water because I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the glass. Then he sat down across from me and opened another folder. Emma, your grandfather was a very thorough man. He knew exactly what would happen when this will was read. He prepared for every contingency. Over the next hour, Mr. Harrison explained everything. Grandpa William had known for years about my father's greed and my mother's manipulations. He had discovered that they planned to push me out of the family deliberately, making me easier to control if I ever became inconvenient. He had watched them mold Brandon into a clone of their worst qualities. And he had watched me, from a distance, survive and even begin to thrive despite having nothing. The will contained provisions that felt like they had been designed specifically to protect me and punish anyone who tried to take what was mine. If any member of the Vance family attempted to manipulate, steal, or defame me in relation to the inheritance, they would forfeit even the small bequests Grandpa William had originally planned to leave them. More than that, he had documented evidence of several questionable financial dealings my father had been involved in, and those documents would be turned over to authorities if they pushed too hard. But there was more. Mr. Harrison handed me a small locked box. Your grandfather left this for you personally. Only you have the combination. The combination was my birthday, the one my family always forgot. Inside the box, I found a letter in Grandpa William's shaky handwriting and a small tape recorder. I pressed play with trembling fingers, and my grandfather's warm voice filled the room. Emma, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in person what I was planning. I watched you work 3 jobs. I watched you go to sleep exhausted and wake up determined. I watched you create beauty in the margins of a brutal schedule, and I knew that you, more than anyone, deserved a chance to do something extraordinary. This money isn't a reward, it's a tool. Use it to build the life you deserve. Don't let them tear you down. You're stronger than all of them. You always have been, I cried. I sat in that expensive conference room and sobbed like a child, clutching the tape recorder to my chest. Mr. Harrison quietly handed me tissues and waited until I had composed myself. What do I do now? I asked. I don't know how to handle this kind of money. That's why I'm here, he said gently. Your grandfather hired me not just as his lawyer but as your advisor. But Emma, I need you to understand something. Your family isn't going to accept this. They're going to come after you with everything they have. He was right. The attacks started within days. Brandon broke into my apartment while I was at work. He didn't steal anything because I had nothing worth stealing, but he trashed the place. He smashed my few dishes, tore up my clothes, and used my mother's lipstick to write on the bathroom mirror, "You'll never deserve this." I called the police and filed a report. I took pictures of everything. I was learning. Then the phone calls started. My mother called first, her voice saccharine and poisonous. Emma, baby, we're family. Blood is thicker than water. Don't let money come between us. Your father is just upset. He'll come around. Come home and we'll work this out together. When that didn't work, she tried threats. You have no idea how to handle this kind of responsibility. You'll be broke within a year, and then where will you be? We're the only ones who understand this world. You need us whether you admit it or not. My father was more direct. He left voicemails calling me a thief, a con artist, a manipulative little bitch who had somehow brainwashed a dying old man. He demanded I return what rightfully belonged to the family. He said I had destroyed everything he had worked for. Brandon sent text messages, dozens of them. Some were threatening. Some were cruel. Some tried to appeal to old memories that had never been good to begin with. I saved everything, every voicemail, every text message, every piece of evidence of their harassment. Mr. Harrison advised me to hire a private investigator, and what we discovered was worse than I imagined. My mother had started calling my old friends and acquaintances, spreading vicious rumors. She told people I had seduced my grandfather, that I had cut him off from his family, that I had forged documents. It hurt. Even though I knew it was lies, hearing that people I once knew believed these things about me felt like being stabbed repeatedly. But the worst came 2 weeks after the will reading. My father attempted to access one of the estate's bank accounts. He had forged my signature on withdrawal papers, trying to transfer $10 million to one of his business accounts. The bank's security system flagged it immediately, and Mr. Harrison was notified. They've crossed the line, he told me. This is fraud. This is criminal. What do we do? I asked. I felt exhausted, beaten down by the constant assault. We fight back. We show them that you're not the helpless girl they threw away. 2 months after my grandfather's death, I sat in Mr. Harrison's office and listened as he explained what we had discovered. My grandfather hadn't just left me money. He had left me a weapon. Every questionable deal my father had made, every tax avoidance scheme, every bribe disguised as a political donation, it was all documented. Grandpa William had been quietly collecting evidence for years. We can destroy them, Mr. Harrison said simply, legally and completely. I thought about the girl I had been, the one who had stood on the doorstep with a duffel bag and shame in her heart. I thought about the woman I had become, working until my hands bled to prove I could survive. No leverage, I said. If they want a war, we'll give them one, but we do it right. We do it legal. Mr. Harrison smiled. That's exactly what your grandfather hoped you would say. My family filed a lawsuit 3 months after the will reading. They claimed I was mentally incompetent to handle the inheritance. They produced a psychiatrist who had never met me but was willing to testify that someone my age couldn't possibly manage billions of dollars responsibly. They painted a picture of me as unstable, reckless, and manipulated. The court date was set for early December. I spent weeks preparing with Mr. Harrison and his team. We gathered evidence, prepared witnesses, and built an airtight case. But nothing could quite prepare me for walking into that courtroom and seeing my family again. They looked confident. My father wore his most expensive suit and an expression of righteous indignation. My mother had dressed like she was going to a funeral, playing the role of concerned parent. Brandon sat behind them, smirking at his phone, already counting his victory. Their lawyer was good. He presented a narrative of a troubled young woman who had been estranged from her loving family, who had no education in finance or business, who was clearly in over her head. He showed pictures of my tiny apartment, my multiple low-wage jobs, implying that someone who lived like that couldn't possibly handle wealth responsibly. Brandon took the stand and lied smoothly about our childhood. My mother wept convincingly while testifying about how worried she was for my well-being. My father spoke about family legacy and responsibility. It was a masterful performance. Then it was our turn. Mr. Harrison stood and approached the judge with calm confidence. Your Honor, we have several pieces of evidence to present. He played the tape recording. My grandfather's voice filled the courtroom, clear and strong and completely lucid. He detailed exactly why he had chosen to leave everything to me. He described watching me survive on my own, build a life from nothing, and never once ask him for money or favors. He explained that he had made this decision over years, not days. The tape continued, and I watched my family's faces pale. Because Grandpa William didn't stop at explaining his decision. He also detailed what he had observed about his son and daughter-in-law. Their greed, their mistreatment of me, their plans. He spoke about Brandon's entitled attitude. He was calm, factual, and devastating. But Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. He presented the evidence of Brandon breaking into my apartment, complete with police reports and photos. He showed the texts, the voicemails, the threatening messages. He played recordings of my mother spreading lies. And then, most damning of all, he presented evidence of my father's attempted fraud, the forged signature, the attempted theft of $10 million. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at my family with barely concealed disgust. Mr. Harrison called me to the stand. I was terrified. But when I sat down and looked out at the room, I saw my grandfather's face in my memory, heard his voice telling me I was strong. I told the truth. I told them about being thrown out at 18. About working 3 jobs. About the only person who had believed in me. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. The facts spoke for themselves. When their lawyer tried to attack me during cross-examination, asking why I never tried to reconcile with my family, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You don't reconcile with people who told you that you were worthless. You survive them." The final piece of evidence was the provision in the will. Mr. Harrison presented it to the court, explaining that William Vance had anticipated exactly this kind of legal challenge. Any family member who attempted to contest the will would forfeit everything. In the event of attempted fraud or criminal activity, certain documents would be released to law enforcement. Mr. Harrison then presented those documents. Bank records showing my father's illegal activities. Tax evasion schemes. Bribes. Your Honor, Mr. Harrison said, this isn't about money. This is about a young woman who was abandoned by her family and survived despite everything they did to break her. This is about a grandfather who saw true character and chose to reward it. The judge didn't take long to deliberate. He dismissed the lawsuit entirely, ruled that the will was valid and would stand, and ordered an investigation into my father's financial crimes. He also issued a restraining order. As the bailiff led my father and Brandon out in handcuffs, my mother collapsed into her seat, sobbing. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered the 18-year-old girl with a duffel bag, and the feeling passed. The next few months were surreal. My father and Brandon were formally charged with fraud. My mother found herself completely ostracized. The Vance name became synonymous with greed and betrayal. Their house was seized. My father's company collapsed. Everything crumbled. I should have felt more satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. Mr. Harrison helped me navigate my new reality. We set up trusts and investments. I rented a modest but comfortable apartment. I bought furniture. I slept in past dawn for the first time in years. Then I started the real work. I established the William Vance Foundation with $1 billion. Its mission was to help young people who had been abandoned by their families. We provided scholarships, housing assistance, job training, and mentorship. Every application I reviewed felt like looking at a version of myself. I enrolled in art school as a part-time student. I took classes in design and business management. I surrounded myself with people who saw me for who I was. It wasn't easy. There were days when imposter syndrome hit me so hard I couldn't get out of bed. There were moments when I missed my grandfather so much I couldn't breathe, but I kept going. 6 months after the trial, I was leaving a coffee shop when I saw her, my mother. She was standing on a street corner, wearing cheaper clothes, looking older. She held a small cardboard sign, "Anything helps." She saw me at the same moment I saw her. Our eyes met. Shame, anger, desperation, hope. She took a step toward me. "Emma," she said, her voice small. "Please." I stood there, looking at the woman who had raised me and rejected me. Part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me wanted to rage at her. But I thought about my grandfather, about his kindness. I realized I didn't want to become someone who kicked people when they were down. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a few bills, enough for a meal and maybe a cheap motel room. I placed them in her hand. "This is for food and a warm place to sleep tonight. Not because I owe you anything. Not because I forgive you, but because I'm not going to become you." I started to walk away, but her voice stopped me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Emma." I turned back. She was crying, real tears this time. She looked broken. "Me too. I'm sorry it had to be like this. I'm sorry you couldn't love me when it mattered." But I'm not that scared girl anymore. And you can't hurt me anymore. Then I walked away. I didn't look back. A year after inheriting my grandfather's fortune, I stood in the gallery space I had just opened in downtown Manhattan. It was called the Second Chance Gallery, and it featured work from artists who had overcome adversity. The opening night was packed. Mr. Harrison stood beside me. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said. "I hope so. I really hope so." Later that night, alone among the artwork, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From that doorstep with a duffel bag, to this moment, owner of my own gallery, head of a foundation, builder of a life I had designed myself. I thought about my family sometimes. My father was serving a reduced sentence. Brandon had moved across the country. My mother was living in a studio apartment, working retail. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't wish them more suffering. But I didn't want them in my life either. They had made their choices, and those choices had consequences. What I had learned was that family isn't always blood. Family is the people who show up for you when you have nothing. It's the grandfather who believes in your dreams. It's the lawyer who protects your interests. It's the friends who stick around. And sometimes, family is yourself. The person you become when you refuse to let cruelty break you. I turned off the gallery lights. Tomorrow, I had meetings with the foundation team. Next week, my senior project at art school. Next month, launching a mentorship program. My life was full in ways I had never imagined. Full of things that mattered, things that made a difference, things that honored the gift my grandfather had given me. As I walked to my car, I looked up at the sky. I liked to imagine my grandfather up there somewhere, proud of the woman I had become. "You were right, Grandpa," I whispered. "I'm stronger than all of them. Not because of the money, but because I learned that my worth isn't determined by the people who rejected me." I drove home past restaurants where I used to wait tables, past coffee shops where I used to make lattes. Now I lived in a world I had built for myself, brick by brick, choice by choice. The inheritance had changed my life, but it hadn't made me who I was. I had done that myself. The money was just a tool. What mattered was what I built with it. That night, I took out the letter my grandfather had written me. I had read it dozens of times, but I read it again. "Emma, you are not what they said you were. You are brilliant and creative and strong. The world tried to break you, and instead you learned to bend without breaking. Use this gift wisely. Use it to build bridges, not walls. Be better than all of us. Remember, you are enough. You have always been enough. I love you, kiddo." I folded the letter carefully. Then I opened my laptop and began working on a blog post for the foundation's website. From nothing to something. It would tell my story to give hope to others standing where I once stood. I wrote about the doorstep and the duffel bag, the 3 jobs and the exhaustion, my grandfather's quiet belief, the inheritance and the battle, and the most important lesson. You don't need $5 billion to start over. You just need courage to walk away from people who diminish you and determination to build something better. You need to believe you deserve more. And remember that their failure to see your value doesn't diminish that value one bit. I finished at 2 a.m. Then I climbed into bed and slept the sleep of someone who had fought hard and won, not just money, but something far more valuable. My own sense of self-worth, my own life, my own future. The last thing I thought before falling asleep was that the people standing in that doorway with cruel smirks didn't get to define me. They didn't get to determine my worth. They didn't get to write the ending of my story. I did, and I was writing a damn good one.